evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of full council on Wednesday, the 15th of March, 2023. In case of emergency, I'll just read out the emergency procedures. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit by the door at the back of the building and walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. Lifts can't be used in an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so. I would like to advise both members of the public and the press this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live. Mobile phones should be switched off unless they're being used for the meeting. Please only speak when I ask you to do so and speak clearly into the microphone. So on to the apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Adams, Councillor Bacon, Councillor Beston, Councillor Dorr, Councillor Love, Councillor Mosdale and Councillor Pitcher. Is there any other apologies I'm not aware of? Okay. On to the agenda. Item 1 is the minutes. Councillor Brodie.
Yes, Chair, I'd just like a correction to the very final paragraph on page 15 and at 41, paragraph that begins Councillor M. Oliver. I think the word in that line should be stroke care, not social care, that related to the budget amendment that I had proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. I've noted that on the minutes. I propose that we do this. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Medland? Oh. Is everybody happy with the minutes? Vote by affirmation. Thank you. I'm just going to sign the minutes. I will move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest? Anybody wish to anything on the agenda? No? Okay, moving on to item 3, the public questions. I have a public question from Mr. B. Hardy of the Youth Council, which has been submitted. Is Mr. Hardy here to read this question? Oh, okay, yes, please. Yep, if you to go to the microphone.
What are you doing to ensure students experiencing child poverty are experiencing the same opportunities as other students?
Thank you. Councillor Andre, would you like to give an answer to that, please?
Yes, Chair. This is a very complex issue. We are providing a lot of support. I will give a shortened response, but have a more detailed response, which will be given. All young people have a right to high quality education and training that opens up pathways to forge successful futures. The pandemic has exacerbated the inequities and educational gaps for those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, both nationally and locally. We are determined to close those gaps. The Isle of Wight Council invests in the early years so that children get off to a good start. We have a good take-up of early years education and our children achieve well. Resources and training for schools to assist in tackling educational disadvantage have been produced and are being used with schools. These are based upon the latest research. The Department for Education provides additional funding to address the needs of disadvantaged students, and we advise schools on the best use of that money. The Isle of Wight Council provides support to all young people to secure an appropriate place in post-16 education or training. In 22-23, a guaranteed place was secured for 98.3% of all our young people on the island, the highest in the South East region and significantly above national average. The island offers a broad and comprehensive range of accessible post-16 academic, technical and vocational options. Examples of support for those from vulnerable groups includes the Council's Careers and Participation Service, which provides one-to-one careers information, advice and guidance. Young people in low-income households are supported to access bursary funds to allow them to stay and progress in education. The UniConnect programme and Nuffield Research Placement ensures better access to higher education. Employability hubs are being developed this year, which will provide new pathways for young people with special educational needs to access employment opportunities. The Holiday Activity and Food Programme has been both developed and funded through the Department for Education. This prioritises young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to access organised out-of-school activities together with a hot meal. With all of these above programmes, we are very happy to engage with the Youth Council to ascertain where we can strengthen this provision still further, as it is vital that we engage proactively with our young people to inform what we do. We will also provide a more detailed written response, which we hope is helpful, together with the 20 strands booklet that is produced, which again gives further details of all the opportunities available. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question at all? Any others? No? I'd like to say thank you for coming and for attending this evening on behalf of the Youth Council. It's nice to encourage you to come here in this forum, so thank you. Is there any other questions from public gallery? No, no other questions. Okay, moving on to item 4 then, which is my announcements. In the few weeks since the last full council meeting, I have been able to experience many wonderful opportunities in my capacity as chair of the council. There was an Isle of Wight ceremony to celebrate the installation of the Archdeacon of the Isle of Wight, the Reverend Stephen Daughtry at All Saints Church in Ryde, which I attended. There has been 2 flag raisings in County Hall car park for the LGBTQ+ week and for Women's Day to show our support for the ongoing campaigns for equality. It was good to highlight that the Isle of Wight Council is leading the way with a female leader, chief executives and chairwoman. So it was good to have that highlighted. It was also a lovely surprise to find out that as chair in this position, I am patron of the Isle of Wight Athletics Club for the duration of this position. And I was asked to attend the AGM and prize giving, and I got to meet the champion discus thrower, Nick Percy, and speak to him, which was very enlightening, and it was great, all the things that he has achieved. And it was great to present the prizes and see so many young people recognised for their sporting abilities. I officiated at a well-attended citizenship ceremony at Seaclose offices with the Deputy Lieutenant Didi Nicholson, and I'd like to thank the staff there that ensure that those run smoothly for all the applicants. Last week, I visited the Newport Congregational Church to see their new chapel that is almost complete and to find out details of the food pantry that will be opening there soon. Thank you. And now we move on to item 5, the Leaders Update Report. Councillor P.C. Wilcox.
Thank you, Chair. Only to add, obviously, on the first part of the report, it talks about the Living Well and Early Help Service. And obviously, when this was written, we hadn't won gold, but we have won gold. So an incredible an achievement there. Credit must be given to the other community partners. We've got the Pan Together, we've got West White, we've got Ventnor and the Baby Box, and all those other places that bring the Living Well and Early Help Service to the people of the Isle of Wight. That's all I wish to add. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Robertson?
Thank you. Leader, with reference to Branston Farm in your report, that's dozens of social homes being delivered with a local housing association. It obviously takes a long time to bring that to fruition. It started under the previous administration and people are moving in under this administration. Where is the pipeline of dozens of social homes that are going to be delivered next year and the year after and the year after? My concern is that nothing's been done in the last nearly 2 years, and there's going to be a lack of homes being delivered in subsequent years under this administration.
I think I'll hand over to the housing person, Councillor Ian Stevens.
Thank you. We have started over the last year or so to negotiate with the rental providers that actually construct on the Isle of Wight. As you know, that area has been barren for many years, not just the previous administration, but the administration before. Branston Farm was the flagship of Vectis Housing. We're looking at other things that are coming forward from Vectis that are in the pipeline at the moment. We're also talking with other rental providers to bring forward some brownfield release fund sites, Berry Hill, etc. I can give you a greater rundown outside of the meeting. Possibly you would prefer a written response. I don't want to drift on and talk too much, but I can assure you that there are things coming into the pipeline. What we must realise that at this moment in time, the construction industry is very, very hard hit, and rental providers are gearing themselves up to take things forward. I've got no starting dates. The one thing I would like to do is to try and it would be rude to say pin people down, but try and get these organisations to actually come forward. We're going to play our part by providing sites, then we really need them to come on board and to start being constructive in a positive manner.
I'd be grateful of a written response. Thank you.
Indeed.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Brading.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask a question of the leader, really. I'll ask if she'd join with me in publicly thanking Steve Crocker and Brian Pope for the great work they've done this council. They're both retiring at the end of this month. Having worked with them closely for 4 years, I know where they've taken children's services from, where it now is. I'd like the leader to ask if she'd join me publicly in thanking them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brading. Yes, I absolutely publicly would like to thank them. Steve's always this very calm man, isn't he? I mean, you know, you go into a meeting and he can bring your levels down like that because the way he sits there. He's going to be a massive loss to us. I didn't actually know that Brian Pope was going as well. That was, yeah. Let's hope that the next person has got really big boots to fill, haven't they? But yeah, I'm sure everybody that's had to deal with Steve or Brian would like to spend our best to them. I don't suppose they're online, but yeah, thinking of them. They have a lovely long retirement.
Yes, I agree with that. Is there any other questions? Councillor Spink.
I'd just like to follow up on that, if I may, as a member of corporate scrutiny. I also understand that Paul Thistlewood is retiring, and no doubt the leader would like to say a few words on his behalf, who, from my point of view, has been of considerable support in my role as a member of corporate scrutiny.
Absolutely agree. Thank you, Councillor Spink. Paul's been here for so long, he's part of the furniture. it's going to be extremely odd not to see him around. I mean, because he just seems to be here almost like 24 hours a day. It's not often that you don't sort of see him around. He's just full of, he's so much knowledge. And he was just so good and so calm at going through everything. Again, a massive loss to this council. But I believe he's been teaching Melanie very well, and let's hope that we can bring on some new people. But yeah, again, a massive loss for this council. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. As we're going off topic of your actual report, I just wanted to ask you a question about International Women's Day. I know you were there on Wednesday last with the flag raising, as were other colleagues in the room. Just glancing around the room, we can see that women aren't the majority in this council anywhere near yet. I think we're about a fifth, I think, if my maths is about right. I'm just wondering, you know, if you had any views on the importance of having women in positions like this, representing their communities, bringing their skills and their different way of looking at things, and how perhaps we as a council can do more, and every single member in this room can do more to encourage women to stand, represent their communities with respect. Thank you.
I think it's an absolute delight to look up there and see two young girls up in the chamber that have got interest in the Youth Council. I helped to start up the Cows Youth Council, and I hope that through my position that I was able to inspire a lot of the female youth through my council work. I think that's the greatest way that you can do it. Through my business Posh Frocks, I had thousands of girls coming in and out through, and I hope that I inspired every single one of them to think that they can be that good and different person. I remember 23 years ago when I first became involved in the political side of what was going on. I really was a complete, you know, I was a young female at that time, not as old as I am now. Or as tired as I am, but and I really was. I was completely out on the limb, and I think it is important to bring a good balance. I think women do bring a really good balance. I know certainly in the prison where we have where it's always been a male-dominated role, bringing female staff into that has completely calmed down situations, and maybe that's what we can do here. One hopes. But thanks, girls. Really lovely to see you.
Thank you, Leader. It's, you know, you're a living example, as you know, a proof of that women are more than just a rib.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree with that, and want to try and be an example with the other women in this chamber that it is possible to anyone out there of the younger generation. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. If I can return the Leader to her report. So I'm very interested in the newly established welfare benefits role that she refers to. Of course, accounting rules are always very difficult, and I'm sure the Section 151 officer wouldn't want to commit too much. But would she explore ways in which, if that role is bringing in additional monies to the council, which I'm sure can't be kind of necessarily projected into our accounts, that some way that monies might be softly ring-fenced to the work of anti-poverty and helping people through the cost of living. I appreciate there will be some accounting difficulties with that sort of request.
Thank you very much. You would ask about money and numbers, and my brain goes, oh, when that happens. Councillor Garrett, I would have to go to the 151 officer to see how that would even be possible, but there's no harm in asking. Would you be prepared to write a little email and then you could send that on to me so I can pass on, or send to the 151 officer directly?
I will do so through the chair. Yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Garrett.
Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I was at the Women's Day flag raising on Wednesday, and it was pointed out to me, and I think we ought to make quite a song and dance about it. We have a Lord Lieutenant who is a lady. We have a High Sheriff who is a lady, Leader of the Council who's a lady, Chairman of the Council is a lady, and our Chief Executive is a lady. And I bet there isn't one council in this country that can get anywhere near those figures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Councillor Churchman. I did touch on that in my report, and it's really good that you've affirmed that, and with the lieutenants and high sheriff as well. We are an example here on the Isle of Wight, so hopefully others will follow. Is there any other questions? Okay, moving on to item 6. We have the report on the use of special urgency provisions. Councillor Peace Wilcox.
I'll just turn to the right page because I was getting caught in the moment there, Councillor Churchman. So yeah, I need to turn the page. Okay, so this is an annual report that has to be produced. I have to submit an annual report to full council containing particulars of all key decisions taken as urgent during the course of the year, to be reported under Regulation 19 of the local authorities. Councillors are therefore asked just to note this annual report for 22-23. Thank you.
I move that we all note that report. Does anyone? No, thank you. We move on to item 7. So feedback. A bit further away. Sorry. I'd like to make sure. Can you hear me? No, it's not. It doesn't like me. Okay. Report of the monitoring officer, the approval of members' allowance scheme. Mr. Potter.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, councillors. This is a report which is required to be placed before the council each year prior to the next financial year, and the report itself should be self-explanatory. Last January, there was an independent remuneration panel which made recommendations, and the council agreed those recommendations in full. I've liaised with the independent remuneration panel as required by last year's council decision, and indeed it's an appropriate thing to do. And this report is in line with those recommendations which were made last year. So I would ask members to agree the recommendations which are set out in the report, and there are no changes proposed. These are entirely in line with the IRP's recommendations and the decision of council last year.
Councillor Robertson.
Could I just ask, the report doesn't seem to contain a reason or a rationale for no increase. I wondered if there was a reason for that, or one could be provided.
Through you, Chair. Certainly. Basically, in order for any changes to be made to a scheme, you would have to have a fresh independent remuneration panel report. And last year, the recommendations included an indexation provision in the scheme, which was agreed to by full council. And an indexation provision is something which a number of authorities do have within their schemes, and that enables any changes which are made to particular amounts to be dealt with. And in this particular scheme, the decision is effectively outside the authority in terms of agreeing nationally according to any increases linked to officer pay effectively. And at the moment for 23-24, as councillors and members of the public will be aware, the negotiations have still not been agreed regarding any increases for officers, and therefore there'll be no knock-on agreement in relation to any increase of allowances for members for 23-24. And members will recall that they agreed, and it is in the paper, that should there be any indexation increases prior to implementation of any such increases, which have yet to be determined nationally, then the IRP will be consulted in order to see whether or not they wish to subject a further report. And it would be that further report, if they were to submit one, which would enable the council to consider any changes to the scheme itself. Sorry for it being somewhat convoluted answer, but effectively without any changes recommended by the IRP, there are no changes recommended tonight.
I recommend we move this report. Councillor Robertson, do you have any other comments?
I think that last sentence from the monitoring officer cleared it up. The point being that there is no recommendation rather than there being a recommendation to positively not increase. I think that was my point. Is that a fair comment through the chair to the monitoring officer?
If you just wish, yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. There are no changes recommended by the IRP, but there has been confirmation over the last few weeks, following consultation on the report, that it is in line with what they recommended last year and what the council agreed to last year.
Councillor Brodie?
It's quite confusing, I have to say, for any bystander looking in or how it will be reported by the Island media source. My personal view has always been that we're in an invidious position of having to be this scheme as recommended by the Independent Remuneration Panel. Entirely invidious. Parliament places upon us, even though, frankly, it's we can change it, but it's always been my view to support the Independent Review Panel. I've always taken a very strong view that this is about compensation for things like loss of earnings for people of working age. Certainly that was something that was very applicable to me in my younger years. What I am a bit puzzled about here is that we agreed one a year ago that agreed to indexation, and that's been presented here as if it isn't an increase. It is an increase, because as we all know, in January, with my allowance advice slip, I noticed quite a large increase because it was backdated to the beginning of April. And when I checked what the trade unions had successfully achieved through the National Joint Council negotiations, that increase was, I think, was just over 5%, which is half what inflation is these days, but was still possibly the biggest increase I've ever seen in my years on this council. And it made me feel a little uncomfortable, particularly since this council was on the point of introducing a increase in its budget that, in my view, is excessive given the cost of living crisis that many of my residents face. What we have here is another report that effectively is saying there is no increase next year, but you will still have indexation when a pay increase is increased for ours, is decided by our staff. One of the things you learn in local government is that every year the trade unions in local government negotiate with the employers at a national level. They put in a huge pay increase. The secretaries of the trade unions say this is never going to happen, we're all going on strike. And it's like the Grand Old Duke of York. They march them to the top of the hill, then they march them down again to settle for something pretty minimal. Then you get it about 10 months later when it's only worth half of what you would have got if you'd accepted it back in April. But that's just my opinion of the trade unions that are involved in that. I haven't been a member of them in the past. What I'm concerned about here is that we're effectively, and the monitoring officer correct me if I'm wrong, that if we agree this, we will still anticipate an increase in line with whatever our officers get with effect from April this year. Is that correct?
Mr. Potter.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, that is correct. And that's why the council sensibly last year, and indeed is recommended this year, that consultation will take place with the Independent Remuneration Panel prior to the implementation of any increase which might be awarded nationally. And Councillor Brodie is absolutely right. You know, under the legislation then, and indeed the scheme, then if there was to be an increase which would be implemented, then it would be backdated to the start of the relevant year, which would obviously be the 1st of April 2023. So there is a time lag, and that does cause confusion. And in relation to the point Councillor Brody made about last year, members of the public and the councils will recall that the negotiations, I think, in terms of officer pay, I think nationally were only concluded around about October, November time. And then pursuant to the decision of January last year, consultation did take place with the Independent Remuneration Panel to see whether or not they wished to submit a report in light of the increase, etc. So yes, there is a time lag, and that can be confusing.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for moving this forward? Councillor Lilley? Okay, then I propose that we go to the vote on that, if everyone's clear their expectations. Those that are for this motion. You count. Those that are against? And any abstentions? Thank you. So that is carried. Thank you. So we are moving on to item 8, report of the local housing benefit scheme review. Is this Councillor Jarman speaking on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. You have before you a paper that relates to the housing benefit scheme. As you are probably aware and familiar with the scheme, there is a statutory disregard of only £10 per week on this. We are seeking here to agree that the authority will use its discretion to discount the income which arrives as a result of war disability payments and indeed the war widows' pensions. The amount is not great, but I think it's a very significant move by us as an authority to recognise those who have been injured or in any way disadvantaged or have lost their loved ones in the act of defending our country. I think there are perhaps a number of members who would like to speak on this, Chair, but I would recommend this to you and formally move that the Council approves the continuation of the Isle of Wight Council's discretionary scheme to disregard war disablement and war widows' pensions in full from the calculation of income for housing benefit purposes. Also, because there are often a number of minor legal amendments that come through, the full Council delegates future minor changes or reviews to the scheme to the Cabinet Member for Strategic Finance, Transformation, Change and Corporate Resources in consultation with the Benefits Manager. And I look for a second.
Yeah, so do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Ward, a second. Would you like to speak on it as well? Yeah, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd personally like to thank Councillor Jarman for bringing this forward and Council in general for supporting the motion, the appreciation. Housing benefit calculations can be undermined by bits of other income and so on and so forth. But to give consideration to our war widows and war disabled, I think is a worthy cause. And I thank you all for supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Is there anyone else would like to comment on that? No, then we'll go to the vote on that. Who would like to vote for that? Is that everyone? Is anyone against? Anyone abstention? No, I think that's everyone then. Thank you. We move on to 8B. So that is the council tax premiums on second homes and empty properties. Is that also Councillor Jarman speaking on that?
Thank you, Chair. Members will be familiar that the Levelling Up Bill brought by the Conservative government, but achieving, I think, very broad support through the House of Lords and indeed through originally through the House of Commons, devolves power to local authorities, and if and when that is finally enacted and it is moved on progressively through that regulatory process, it enables local authorities to apply a council tax premium of up to 100% on empty properties and second homes, two separate and distinct issues. Our constitution on the Isle of Wight ensures that the determination of council tax policy is not a member exclusively for Cabinet alone and is reserved for full council, which is why it's brought before this group today. It has been through corporate scrutiny and Cabinet and has received quite a lot of debate in between those processes. The element within our council tax, within our constitution, which is applicable here in section 4 under full council is sections B, which is where we are concerned with adopting or amending a budget and policy framework, and item D, which is the setting of council tax. Clearly, this has an impact on both of those issues, and therefore it also refers within our constitution to section 5, which is the budget and policy framework itself, item C relating to council tax. That bill has completed its readings and committee stages in the Commons and has progressed, as the paper says, into the Lords. In fact, it's moved on within the Lords. It's had its first and second readings and advanced now to the committee stage. At present, within that bill, the clauses dealing with the activation of those two separate and distinct matters have slightly different wording. The difference is important. One implies a retrospective component, the other not. This may or may not be aligned as the bill reaches its final conclusion. All conditions require billing authorities to declare their intent 12 months prior to enactment of the revised billing. This paper proposes that full council declare the intention to charge that 100% maximum allowed within the regulations on both empty properties and second homes, accepting that if the wording of the bill remains as is, one may need to be repeated later. If, however, the declaration is passed today and upheld, it will result in an additional potential revenue to the council of around 6 million on second homes and around 286,000 on empty properties. Those figures are constantly in some degree of flux, and hence they are estimates of the potential revenue. I recognise what was discussed at corporate scrutiny and the idea there of removing an individual figure from one or more of those conditions, and that has received considerable discussion since. I am mindful of those discussions and in particular the recommendations and direction of our 151 officer in writing to all members of this council, as in our budget documentation itself last month, that we are guided in the most strongest of terms to maximise our revenue potential. And hence, I have maintained that figure of 100% within this recommendation. I know that the paper is both a belt and braces approach in making that declaration of intent now. but it also sends a clear signal to property owners of our intent at the earliest opportunity, and I believe they deserve that. It ensures that we maximise the revenue opportunity at the earliest possible date and that we do not risk foregoing substantial income. We therefore are respecting the 151 officer's direction to maximise revenue, as we did in the budget. It is all. I believe there was a time limit on introducing a paper. Is it?
5
Right.
minutes to the paper.
Okay. Well, there's only one more paragraph. So anyway, I move the recommendations continued in here and note that almost 50 councils have now either proposed this or passed it, including 19 Conservative councils, 8 Liberal Democrats in discussion, 4 Labour, etc., etc. So we are
Do we have-
monitoring those as we go on.
Oh, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Stevens. Would you like to speak on that, Councillor Stevens?
Be quite candid, I'll wait until later if the debate allows. I think that Councillor Jarman's spoken quite adequately on.
Would any other member like to speak? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. I too support the principle of the Isle of Wight Council charging a premium on second homes and empty properties, and I made that very clear at corporate scrutiny. My concern is some of the words spoken by the Cabinet member are perhaps accidentally misleading in my view, and I say that with respect. There is nothing today that will lead to any revenue for the council. There is no law that allows this council to raise any money through a second home premium. If the council today decides that it intends to in the future and a new law comes in, today's decision was entirely irrelevant and it would have to go through the entire process again, corporate scrutiny, cabinet, full council. I think this motion is misleading to the public. I think it raises an expectation of £6 million that may never come. And I note that the cabinet member today refers to revenue for the council. At full council, he made, I apologise, at corporate scrutiny, he made an impassioned speech that it would clear out second homeowners and that it would bring houses to the market and it was to help solve the housing problem. And then in his view, he didn't want money for the council, he wanted those homes. I think the rationale on which the figure of 100% is based has not been set out. I don't see any evidence or data of the amount of homes this is supposed to bring to market. And I don't see any serious proposal or principle of why 100% has been arrived at. I state again, I support the principle of a premium, but I think the percentage needs to be based on analysis, facts and evidence when the law comes in and when this council actually has the power to make this decision. I would therefore like to propose an amendment which supports the spirit of this motion, that the council intends to bring a premium on second homes and on empty properties at a figure to be determined when the council has the power to decide a figure. That is my proposal for an amendment. I look for a seconder.
Councillor Quirk.
And I should just say that's in line with the corporate scrutiny recommendation too.
Councillor Bodie, would you like to speak on that?
Thank you, Chair. As somebody who's spent a long time in a political party, I understand political posturing when I see it. This is political posturing of the extreme, to be frank. But I entirely agree with Councillor Robertson that whilst I entirely support the principle on which this is based, I don't know why it's even before us tonight. I think it's a waste of time. We haven't even got the legislation before us. We don't know what might happen at Westminster in the meantime. It hasn't gone anywhere near a second or third reading, as I understand it. Even if it does, it'll probably be amended. I think to be bringing this sort of proposal forward is entirely misleading. I think also, people need to understand that there's figures that are being spouted, 6 million for one of them, nearly 300,000 for the other. Almost certainly, whomever is in government will take that into account when they're looking at your grants in future years. So don't think you're going to get a bonus. Don't believe that you're going to get 6.3 million, you know, out of the sky, because almost certainly it will be deducted in its entirety from future revenue support grants or whatever they're called these days from central government. I support the amendment. I will vote for it, but I think let's move on with something that's far more important, and that's child poverty. Thank you very much.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. I thought there was someone before me, but I'll seize the opportunity. I was going to second, and I still will if we go back to the substantive. But what I want to say here is that administrations throughout the previous years have gone to central government with the MP saying we need money. We need money for the Isle of Wight. We need money for services. We note that other local authorities throughout England have gone and moved this forward as an intent. We would be seriously lacking if we sat back and did nothing when others are doing it, and we're saying, going up with the MP and saying to the ministers, please can we have funding for the Isle of Wight? The first thing possibly a minister would say is, well, others are doing this, that and the other. What are you doing? Oh, we're going to wait a year. And then we're going to see what comes out the other end. And then we just might, put it back through scrutiny, put it back through cabinet and put it back through full council. I'm not agreeing that there should be a figure attached to this at all. What I'm saying is this is the opportunity to say to government, the media, our residents, that we are trying every way to take things forward in an appropriate manner, as are 50 other local authorities. Why should the Isle of Wight sit back on its heels and wait and wait and wait? Wait one more year. Let's wait a year after that. Let's try and decipher what's coming forward. Hold on. We've got an opportunity. We've got people travelling to London, people contacting London via email, speaking to Bob Seeley, our MP, pushing Bob Seeley every inch of the way to get things done. And then we're going to sit in here and say, oh, well, it might be 6 million, it might not be. Forget the figure. Think of the intent. And let's also look at the empty property side of it, and not just the second homes, because there's empty properties outside. And I've said this before. There are blight on the neighbourhood where people have to live alongside them. Some of them. We need the empty properties. Councillor Robertson's quite right to push and push and push about the social housing. We need to get people out of temporary accommodation. There are over 200 people in temporary accommodation on this island at the moment. We will go home tonight. We will open our front door. We will go in and the heating will be on, or we'll put it on, and we will be warm and snug. We've got children in caravans. That's what I'm about, and that's what I'm trying to put forward as an intent. And this is about intent. Forget the 6 million, forget the 300k. Let's talk about the intent and show a signal to central government. Thank you.
Councillor Brading.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be supporting Councillor Robertson's amendment to this. I think if this paper said a premium for second homes and a premium for properties, I would have supported it. I do think the two things are separate as well. To treat them both the same, wrong. There are second homes on this. There's certain communities on this island that really do benefit from second homeowners. Like, you know, I won't use examples, but second homeowners I know do put a lot of money into the local economy when they come here. But the two issues, you cannot link them both 100%. There is no legislation that enables to do that yet. I understand it did go through corporate scrutiny, and I read the notes of corporate scrutiny. If this said a premium to be considered on those two, and that's a statement we take for this council, That's absolutely a perfect way to approach things. It does, as the council say, we intend to put a premium on second homes and on rented, on rented properties. But to say 100% at this point, I think is wrong. I know that scrutiny cross-party, that same opinion. I think to make a statement is good, and so I support the amendment fully. Thank you.
Councillor Quigley.
When the time comes, I will vote for the maximum, whatever it is. But that time hasn't come yet. If this doesn't get through Parliament before the end of March, this won't be chargeable until 25-26 financial year. So quite a long way out. We did discuss it quite at length at corporate scrutiny, and whereas ordinarily I'd like to jab Councillor Robertson in the ribs, as I'm sure he's fully aware, the debate made sense at the time, because I think it's more important that we actually, as 39 or over minority now, show that we are all under the same intent to support the motion. As much as it galls me to not put a figure to it tonight, I don't think it means anything. And as Councillor Robertson has said, it doesn't mean anything. So even if you support Councillor Robertson's motion with gritted teeth, it doesn't mean anything. But if we all say we've got the intent, then it does mean something. So there is quite clearly a lot of work to be done, because this is already in the 4 questions we've had asked. It means there's a lot of information still required. So I will vote for the maximum when the time comes. The time isn't there yet. So I will support Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Quirk.
Speaking for the amendment, quite clearly, what is it's important to actually show our intent. Making a number up that may not actually be a number that's allowed by the time it comes out of the other end of the legislation. It's nonsense. Better to actually support and actually show the intent, and actually probably something that we can actually show intent as a whole council, rather than just a balance group.
Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. A couple of days ago, I was talking to a resident. This resident lives in a home that was formerly a holiday chalet. They're cold. They can't afford to put the heating on. They are really, really struggling. What I think is so important with this motion is that we show our support for those people, those families that we all have that are living in poverty in our areas. For me to go back to that person and say, well, you know, when we don't want to see a premium imposed upon second homeowners. We don't want to see a premium imposed upon. Will you let me finish?
Point of information, it's extremely...
Continue, Councillor Fuller. Continue. It's your floor.
Very much.
It's extremely important. That's not
It's
my
not your turn to speak.
Point of
Councillor Fuller,
information.
you can wait till after he's finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have these residents that would like to see empty homes filled. We have we have second homes that are empty for sometimes 40, 50 weeks of the year. What good is that? We are here to provide homes for our local communities, and I think we have to get going at the very earliest opportunity to say to government, like other authorities are saying, this is important for us. This is important for our island. This is what our residents require. And this is why I am supporting the original proposal put forward by Councillor Jarman, because it is so important for the residents that are coming up to me, knocking on my door, attending my surgeries. If I can't say to them, I'm not going to support the 100%, then I may as well give up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Point of information, please, Chair.
There's no need for points of information.
There's a point of information. He misrepresented my amendment. Please take advice. He misrepresented my amendment. Chair, Councillor Fuller spoke on my amendment as though I was proposing there is no indication given that this council wants to charge a premium. That's entirely against my amendment. My amendment is in line with Councillor Jarman's proposal. this council intends to charge a premium on second homes and on empty homes, which gives comfort to your ward members and mine.
I think he explained his intent as he went on in his explanation, that it was about the way he was explaining it to his residents. Councillor Stewart, it's your turn.
Thank you. Firstly, I wasn't planning to speak on this. I thought it was so straightforward. I was surprised that we didn't just simply pass it through. But I'd forgotten that I'm a councillor now, and so we're supposed to argue about things anyway and debate. The basic argument is very clear. The intent should be there. You don't need to amend it. 100% is a figure which we can put forward as what we plan to do in certain circumstances. I can see no reason to amend it. I think that we should be looking for the maximum figure so that not so much just for the money, we have no idea what that will be at the moment, but for the intent to make it clear for the Isle of Wight people that housing is important and that second homes, very nice people, many of them are not the critical aspect for the people who live on the Isle of Wight who cannot find somewhere to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, Councillor Stewart spoke. I wasn't going to speak on this, but it was very straightforward. We would just move it on, seeing as it's part of a longer process, and the actual debate will be had further down the line once this is made legislation. I'm actually quite shocked about this coming forward. I listened very carefully at corporate scrutiny to you, Councillor Robertson, and other members of the scrutiny committee. You know, I was listening very intently. But the situation is, we have people on this island who are in poor accommodation, as Councillor Fuller said, or in no accommodation at all, or in overcrowded accommodation. And now, and we are debating whether, you know, people who are luxury have got a second home are going to have some kind of precedence. Now, we charge the maximum we can of 5% in council tax increase. That's the maximum we're allowed to charge. So why wouldn't we not look at getting the most out of the second home situation that government are providing? You know, I was in Wales just recently, and they've had 100% on the second homes for quite some time. And also they're looking to do it again because trying to save their services, their valued services, and it hasn't affected the second homes market at all. They're still in Pembrokeshire, still got many second homes. We need to get out of this room and step outside and see what's really going on with our people that are in poor accommodation. We can't go to government, and you spent 4 years trying to get the island deal. The Conservatives, you failed as well. We're trying, we're doing our best because we need the money. We need the money to run this council, to provide services our residents deserve and need of a good quality, and we need homes. That's what I hear from you all the time, Councillor Robertson. We need homes. Yes, we do. And how we can say to government, do you know what, actually, no, we'll just have like 10% on that, or 5-10%. You know, it's just ridiculous. Why aren't we taking every advantage we're being given? I just don't compute it. So you may guess I'm not going to be supporting your amendment.
Councillor Lilley.
Thank you, Chair. I think the important thing is the intent. But I actually think that we should have an intent that says 100 people. And it's quite interesting that there are 19 Conservative councils, including North Yorkshire, where our Conservative Prime Minister lives. I'm not sure whether his house is actually seen as a second home. Got a very big swimming pool and some issues in that regard. But and hopefully they want 100%, and it would be very good to be 100% on the second home of the actual Prime Minister. Within that, you've got South Hants, you've got West Devon, got a range of councillors that are Conservatives who disagree with you in a sense, Councillor Robinson, because they're actually saying 100%. The important principle is we are laying down the gauntlet of the fact that actually this is serious. We can, through the local government association and cumulative with those other councils, put through our various MPs in the actual debate of the levelling up that this is our intention and we welcome that. And actually, practically all the local authorities that are in that 4950 figure are actual, places like Cornwall that actually have got a serious issue. We should be united together and say we want our aspiration of 100%, and I think it's quite right to say it now.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think anyone here disagrees with the spirit of what we're talking about here. It's putting a number on it, which is the issue. And it's not that any of us here don't want to charge second homeowners 100%. It's the fact that it's a bit misleading to the public, that the public will be listening to the headline from tonight's meeting to say that the Isle of Wight Council will be charging 100% premium on second homeowners. And that is simply not true. And that is how it will be reported. No offence to the media, but that's the headline. The amendment is saying that we will charge a premium. That premium is likely to be 100%. That's what is the argument about? Seriously, what's the argument about? This went through corporate scrutiny. It was well debated, and let's say if there was a recommendation tonight from corporate scrutiny, it would be that a premium, not 100%, would be going on this. And secondly, the elephant in the room in this discussion is that any decision made tonight, it doesn't deliver one home. It's not going to get anyone out of their house and free up some big house in, no offence, Joe, in Benbridge, and let a load of people move into it. It's not going to happen. This, to even suggest that this is going to deliver one home to one of our needy islanders who need a home, and we want our islanders that haven't got a home to have a home, but this isn't going to do it. So stop pretending it is. I'll vote for the amendment. If the amendment falls, I'll vote for the substantive. But at this moment, we should all be voting for the amendment. And it's not a political choice to do that. Thank you.
I can't go back to any other councillors, but I
have a point of order, Chair.
Thank Councillor Jarman.
Thank you. I just have to reflect back on one of the statements that was made earlier regarding the status of the bill. And there were statements that were made that were completely correct within that, but the part that was wrong was the very clear words, and I'll quote, "It's not near a second reading." But the bill has gone through the House of Commons through the first and second readings, and through the committee stage, and through the third reading. It has then been sent over to the Lords, where it has gone through the first and second reading and is in the committee stage. So it has completed the second readings in both houses with relatively minor amendments, particularly on this clause, where it has received very broad cross-party support. And I think it is on the back of that, and on the recognition that was within that statement, that this money is likely to be taken into account in our overall calculation, which is the correct part of that statement, that we should be going for 100%. If we do not, the differential between whatever we come up with and 100% will still be lost to us as a council. That will still be cuts to our services, cuts to our island. We need to make sure from the very outset that we are with 100%, nothing else. Any other suggestion at all is itself very misleading. It implies that we don't need 100%. It implies that we would be looking at some other figure. None of those can be true. So the point of order is very clear. It is well advanced. It has received the second reading in both houses. And I urge everybody to stick with the original motion with that correction. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like clarification from someone, hopefully perhaps the monitoring officer, and that is simply on this. I'm very much in favour, as I think people know, of social housing. And part of me wants to vote for this and for the 100%. The other part of me, however, makes me feel this, that we haven't really considered this. There's no detail on it. And
if I vote for it now, that it's 100%, I will feel duty bound to vote for it in a year's time for 100%. And I may well have good reason for changing my mind. It may be, for example, that it should be 100% on certain properties and less percentage on others. I don't know. I'm a firm believer that second homeowners should pay a higher council tax, but I haven't yet decided what it should be. Now, the point of order that I was asking for is this, that Councillor Stevens, if I understood him correctly, was saying, if we don't vote for the 100% now, the opportunity to have that amount might then be further kicked down the road. That's what you said. You may not have meant that, but what you were saying was that if we don't vote for it now, we won't get it for maybe 1, 2 or 3 years' time. My understanding of the situation is that isn't right. That when the bill comes in, the levy won't be decided for 1 year thereafter, and we will have time to vote for the amount that we want at that stage. Now, if you're right, Ian, Councillor Stevens, I'll vote for the original motion, but if you're wrong, I'd like to decide how much we should be charging at the relevant time. And I wonder if the monitoring officer can tell us what the law is, and if indeed it does kick the can further down the road, or if we can still take advantage of it.
Could you provide clarification, Mr. Potter?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think that the first point to reiterate, which I think has already been stated this evening by councillors across the board, the law is not currently in place. There has been mentioned, quite rightly, that it's a bill. It is currently going through the House of Lords. As Councillor Jarman's correctly said, it is at committee stage. The important thing to get across to everybody is that you're not council tax setting tonight. You have no legal power to do so. The bill can be further amended, but it remains a bill. The local authority, indeed any local authority, any of the 50 quoted, have no powers to make any decisions on the level premiums to be set at the moment. What is absolutely clear is that councils may give a expression of intention in terms of future action, i.e. they are predisposed towards a particular course of action without committing themselves to a particular outcome. The bill talks about second homes and talks about empty dwellings. In terms of the declaration of intention, which has been mentioned this evening, I need to clarify that for all members. You can, if you so choose, have this predisposition, which seems to be cross-party. But I need to correct any misapprehension in that you are not being able to effectively start the clock running by relying on any expression of declaration of intention this evening. A, you have no power to do so, and B, the actual wording in relation to the second element, which is the empty properties, for those who are particularly following the fine detail going through the House of Lords, clause 76, subsection 3, it's a clause, not a section, states a billing authority's first determination, and these are the crucial words, under this section, must be made at least 1 year prior to the beginning of the financial year to which it relates. So the law is not in place. The proposal in the bill itself would say you have to make, when you do have the power, which you do not currently, you would have to make it at least 1 year prior to the beginning of the financial year. So the words in the clause under this section. So there's no possibility of being able to rely on starting the clock running now in relation to empty property, sorry, second homes, I should say, in relation to second homes. In relation to empty properties, I pick up a point which Councillor Jarman rightly stated. The clause 75 relating to empty properties, it proposes at the moment to reduce the 2-year period to the 1-year period. And the bill itself does actually say in relation to particular empty properties, the period of 1 year can effectively start before the bill becomes law. That's not imposing the premium, it's just the calculation of the 1-year period for which a property is deemed to be empty. So in summary, the law is not in place for you to set any council tax premiums now. You can actually indicate, which seems to be cross-party, your wish to make clear of the intention, subject to the legislation being in place, that you would wish to impose council tax premiums. And the final point from me is obviously just to remind members of the principles of decision making in the council's own constitution, which requires you to take into account all relevant considerations and ignore those which are irrelevant. Hopefully that is a satisfactory explanation. Should you have any more queries through the chair, could you just let me know? Thank you.
May I, Chair, please? It's probably my fault, but I'm still rather unclear, I have to say. Will the fact that we don't pass, let's look at first of all council tax as opposed to our empty homes, will the fact that if we agree to the amendment, will that in any way prejudice or, as it were, increase the waiting time for this council to be able to charge the 100%? My understanding is that as far as that's concerned, the answer is no. Is that correct? It won't prejudice us.
Thank you, Chair. The simple answer is no.
Now, the second point about the empty...
Point of order there, Chair. Could the monitoring officer clarify if his remark occurs on both cases?
No, I was going to ask about the
and,
second point. So it's no on the first point regarding council tax. With regard to the empty properties, you tended to suggest, I think, that there might be some disadvantage and that might prejudice us if we don't agree it now. Is that right or wrong?
Through you, Chairman. Happy to make that clearer. Again, the answer would be no, there's no prejudice at all. The matter in relation to the first matter was second homes. In relation to the second matter, we're talking about empty properties. What the wording of the proposed bill says in relation to the empty properties bit, if you just please bear with me, you sort of go to the relevant bit, which is in clause 75. Basically, it is substituting a 2-year period for 1 year, and the actual crucial matters, I think, is in the following one, which says the amendments made by subsection 1 have effect for financial years beginning on or after the 1st of April 2024. And then it carries on. And in relation to the amendments made by subsection 1B, which is 2 years down to 1, it does not matter whether the period mentioned in section 11B8 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 begins before this section comes into force. So in other words, the 1 year period for an individual empty property could start running now. And therefore, when you set the council tax premiums for 24-25 in relation to empty dwellings, then that could come into force from 24 to 25. The other one, which is the one you dealt with before, the second homes bit, there's the current wording makes it more difficult because the bill would have to be enforced by 31st of March this year. Otherwise, you're not going to give that 1 year advance intention. That was the point I was trying to get across earlier, that nothing you do tonight can be relied on to start that clock running in relation to second homes because of the way the wording currently states in the bill. If the wording changes, it's a different ball game. It's been mentioned by members, obviously, of contact with MPs up and down the country to seek to try and change the situation. But at the moment, the short answer to both those ones are no. And we have to wait to see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Peace.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Councillor Price. I think he nailed it on the head that there's two separate arguments here. There is affordable homes and people living in temporary accommodation, and then there's the subject of second homes. Big empty houses and second homes is not going to help those people that need homes on this island that can't afford to move into homes. So that's a completely separate issue. I think the issue for me, and I think the issue for most people outside of this chamber, is that if you can afford to buy a second home on this Isle of Wight, you can damn well afford to pay 100% council tax. And I think you should be. That's my take on it, and that's my own personal opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Peace Wilcox.
Like everybody else, I wasn't really going to speak on this. I thought it was quite a straightforward thing. I can't remember how many years I've been campaigning to get us some extra legislation to be able to fight to get empty homes and the second homes the issue raised and sorted. There's one thing on our recommendation. This is the original recommendation. 2 words. That this council declares its intention to implement. We have to declare that intention to implement so that we can start charging from April 2024. Your motion is supports the spirit of the motion. I wish to declare our intention to implement, and it's something I've been waiting for a very long time.
We now have got a situation. I mean, I have to say this whole thing is so half-baked. It's unbelievable. I'm not on the scrutiny committee. I'm not a cabinet member, thank God. But we're presented with this. Half this council, you don't have all the background information about this. We're taking a very brief look at the whole situation. I've listened to the monitoring officer who says one thing. The leader of the council says something else. Now, surely you got your act together, at the top of this council before you bring a paper to council. I notice this paper doesn't even have the name of an officer on the bottom. It's almost as if the corporate management team disowned it. Normally, I would expect to see the name of an officer on the bottom of something that came to full council. This doesn't. It comes from Councillor Jarman. That's most unusual. I really do think, well, perhaps we need to be deferring this to a future meeting. Let's have a proper report to full council that details all of the issues that Councillor Robertson outlined at the start as to a full analysis of the benefits and the disbenefits of actually introducing it. And I would charge 1,000% if I could. But, let's do it intelligently instead of political posturing, which is all we're getting here. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, point of order. That's not a point of order. It's just a statement, Jeff. You know that.
I'm well aware of that, but I thought I'd let Councillor Brodie have his turn to speak. I propose that we move to the vote on the amendment, but would you like to add something to that?
Chair, I was going to agree that we should delay this because we've got a situation where the monitoring officer has given advice which the council must listen to and acknowledge that's his role. The leader has said something in direct contradiction to that and presumably is not going to withdraw it even though it's wrong. I think it would be helpful to the leader herself and to the credibility of this council to delay this until that has been cleared up. I think it would be at a great advantage to the leadership of the council, both corporate and political.
Chair, we have also
Going to hold an adjournment at this moment to get further information.
Withdrawing your amendment then?
No, I'm inviting.
I'm adjourning and then we can discuss this. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. We're back at 7:30. Thank you. Is everybody back in their seats? We will return to the meeting. I would like to close the debate on this motion, but I'll come to Councillor Jarman to close that if nobody else would like to speak at this point. Councillor Jarman.
Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment to the amendment. I'm encouraged to propose an amendment to the amendment of Councillor Robinson, which maintains the 100% figure on the empty homes and for the moment removes any figure specifically from the second homes in the paper. And I look for a seconder of that.
Councillor Jordan seconds that.
Accepted, Joe.
Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, just to clarify, I mean, I've said everything on the topic that I feel I need to say. I don't agree with that motion. Simply, this isn't about the difference between empty homes and second homes. This is about putting a percentage on a recommendation that has no effect in law and needs to come back before the council. So, just for the record, I don't support that second.
Chair, I think you'd called an end to the debate. We have a motion which is duly seconded, and I believe you have to carry on. And
do you have any other comment on that amendment to the motion before we move forward to the vote on it?
No, I think you've got a motion which is duly seconded, and I think the Constitution requires you to move immediately to the vote on that.
Chair, point of order, and I think I advise you not to listen to Councillor Jarman, whose interpretation of the Constitution is dodgy. It's
point of information.
Yes, it's a point of order, actually. I'm not sure you can propose to amend an amendment when you've got an amendment being debated at the time. So therefore, you should not have accepted that from the chair. You should deal with Councillor Robertson's amendment first. Then, if that is carried...
Get clarification on that.
Oh, well,
thank you, Councillor
yeah,
Brodie.
fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms Potter?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. For the sake of clarity, we have tabled an amendment put forward by Councillor Robertson. And if I read the proposed amendment, which is on the floor from Councillor Robertson, just to check that it's accords with his understanding. So the proposed amendment is that full council declares its intention to implement and approve the additional council tax premiums to be applied from the 1st of April 2024 or as soon as possible thereafter, subject to the legislation being in place, with a figure to be determined for such premiums. So to recap, that full council declares its intention to implement and approve the additional council tax premiums to be applied from the 1st of April 2024 or as soon as possible thereafter, subject to the legislation being in place, with a figure to be determined for such premiums. For the sake of clarity, those premiums relate to second homes and empty properties.
Okay, with that amendment to the original motion, we will now vote on that. Those for that amendment. Those against? It's the motion, the amendment to the motion is carried, so we will now vote on that as the substantive motion. No, we have to vote on it again. So it's all those for the motion as a whole now.
On point of order, can I just, what happened to my amended motion, which was duly seconded?
Just clarify that.
Through you, Chairman. The what you sought to put as an amendment to the amendment was not dealt with because there was already an amendment on the floor which has been carried and now has become the substantive motion. So members have been asked to vote through the wording of the amendment, which is now the substantive motion. We'll find out from the result of that vote whether or not the substantive motion, i.e. the amendment wording, is carried or not.
Councillor Brodie?
Chair, loath as I am to contradict the monitoring officer, I will have to agree with Councillor Jarman this time. We now have a motion as amended, which can now be amended. However, you cannot propose an amendment that is the direct negative of what has already been agreed. Is that correct, monitoring officer?
That is correct. The wording in the procedural rules indicate what can be accepted as a valid amendment. And therefore, if effectively the wording of an amendment negates the substantive motion, then it is not an amendment which can be regarded as valid. So although amendment might have been put forward, it's not a valid amendment. Therefore, Chairman, I would ask members to continue to deal with the substantive motion which is on the floor, and for members to indicate whether it's for, against, or abstain. Thank you.
Councillor Jordan?
Thank you, Chair. I'm confused because the bit of paper we've all got, it's got two, item 1, item 2. Item 2 says 100% premium for properties been empty and furnished. Our proposal doesn't alter that in the negative in any way, shape or form. That cannot be true, that we are seeking to amend it in the negative. Cannot be true.
It alters the amended motion, I believe so, unless there is another amendment to the amended motion.
The point I'm making, Chair, is Councillor Brodie said that our amendment sought to make a negative proposal.
Chair,
Doesn't,
personal explanation.
it's on
I said
the amendment paper, Chair.
It was a negative. I never said it was, because frankly, I
It's
never
on the
heard what
paper,
Councillor
Chair.
Jarman said. I would
Okay,
like
thank
people
you.
not to interpret my words to suit those purposes. I said, if it was in the negative.
Thank
If
you,
listen
Councillor
to the
Brodie. I
recording,
do
you
believe
will
there's
find that is correct.
been some
Thank you.
confusion over the wording.
It would assist, shall I put it again so that the wording is very clear and specific? I've got a monitoring
Councillor
officer
Stevens?
nodding at me.
Thank you, Chair. There's so much muttering going on around here. Can we have one person speaking rather than someone trying to outshout the other one? That's my point. But the other point is we've got a substantive and we should be able to amend that substantive motion. And that is what we propose to be doing.
Councillor Jarman, would you like to propose a different amendment to the motion?
My wording is not to negate the amended motion which is before us. It is simply to ensure that within the two items 1 and 2, they are not dealt with in the same way. We accept the removal, the proposal is to accept the removal of the 100% premium on second homes, but to include the 100% premium for empty properties. And I believe the monitoring officer earlier correctly identified that it is empty properties where the retrospective enablement is provided under legislation in the draft bill.
Councillor Robertson?
With respect, the cabinet members seeking to overturn the vote that's just been had, which is that 100% is removed from both elements, and he's seeking to simply reverse that or reverse half of it.
Chairman, my advice to you is that the amendment put forward to the substantive motion would, in actual fact, negate the substantive motion. The substantive motion had been put forward to remove the figures, and therefore any amendment seeking to reinsert the figures would be negating it in the circumstances.
Councillor Stevens?
Clarification from the monitoring officer, please. The empty properties element of this motion, we want to make sure that we can next year start to charge 100% on the reduced timescales. Hold on, Jeff. Give me a look. Just you've been shouting all evening. Are you lonely or something? Just button up.
Councillor Prodi, I'd like to listen. I need
Lovely.
clarification on this point as well. So I would like to hear it, please. Thank you.
Can I finish? Thank you. All I want is to make sure that we do not lose that shortened timescale on the empty properties. And if we do, I'd like it to be known that it's due to the substantive, the new substantive motion. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Potter, I would like clarification on that we're not going to jeopardise it at a further point.
Chairman.
I'm just asking for clarification on this point because we are discussing something quite important. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. In terms of the current wording of the bill, it is quite clear in relation to empty properties that the council would be able, when the legislation's in force, would be able to impose a premium in respect of empty properties from the financial year 2024 to 2025. So that's why obviously earlier I indicated no and no to the questions put forward by Councillor Spink. So you will not be losing out anything tonight because the legislation in relation to empty properties, specifically, if you bear with me whilst I quickly look at the wording a bit, just quickly look through. Where are we?
Chair, I have a point of order here, and I really require the monitoring officer to be very cautious in what he says in answer to this. I would encourage that strongly. If the legislation comes into effect before the beginning of the next financial year, and we have forgone this evening the opportunity to provide that indication, is it correct that we would not be able to levy that on the council tax in the 24-25 year? Very precise question, and it requires a very precise answer, I think.
Through you, Chairman, your interpretation, Councillor Jarman, is wrong.
Mr. Potter, could you clarify to me that so that at a later point we could charge 100% when it is legislation?
At the moment, I repeat, the local authority and other local authorities have no legal power to impose anything at the moment. In relation to the empty properties dwelling side, to answer Councillor Stevens' point again, I can give him and others the reassurance that under the wording of the present bill, it talks about the change from 2 years to 1 year being able to take effect from 1st of April 2024. And again, repeat that the timescale of an empty property being empty, the 1 year in the bill is proposed to run even before the Act comes into force. So the reassurance can be given specifically to Councillor Stevens' point. But in relation to the issue about the other aspect of it, if you bear in mind whilst I quickly look at it, second homes element, and again I'm quoting from the wording of the bill as it currently stands, it specifically prevents the local authority from making a determination at the moment. It says, clause 76 subsection 3, I repeat, a billing authority's first determination under this section, it's not a section until it becomes law, must be made at least 1 year before the beginning of the financial year to which it relates. The stage at which the bill currently is again I repeat, is at the committee stage in the House of Lords, and it's in the 5th day of the committee stage. So, you know, the law is not in place tonight. Any wish to for the wording of the bill to be changed is in the hands of Parliament, because at the moment, the way they've got it drafted is that there's going to be a year's delay from the first determination. And there's nothing which any local authority can do about it if that wording carries on into law. They've deliberately got a year's delay on the second homes element, but not the empty properties. Thank you.
So it was clarification on the empty properties part of this that I wanted to be sure that we wouldn't jeopardise the option to charge 100% at the right time once it was passed.
Again, Chair, just to repeat and to satisfy Councillor Stevens again, I think he's satisfied, but just to make absolutely clear, fundamentally at the moment, you've got no powers whatsoever to impose any premiums tonight. Full stop. The bill does propose the ability from 2024 for local authorities to charge for empty properties. So when it stands to be decided in terms of setting the council tax budget for next year, then you can, if the bill goes forward into law, then you will be able to consider the up to 100% at that time for next year. But as currently things stand for the other element, you would have to delay it until 25, 26. And also you'd have to take into account the statutory guidance, which again is in the bill and has not yet been issued for obvious reasons. So it's a sort of a mixed blessing, if you like. There's a different timescale, but I can totally reassure members that, you know, you cannot and should not be criticised for doing anything tonight in terms of anything more than an expression of future intention, which alerts other people to the fact that should the legislation be in place, then your intention, subject to reading and understanding the law as it is enacted and enforced, and any statutory guidance, and again, hence the principles of decision making, taking into account relevant and ignoring irrelevant considerations. So hopefully one's given some clarification at least. Thank you, Chairman.
Is everybody clear? Councillor Jarman.
Whatever happens this evening, I do have to note that what we've just heard is in direct contradiction to the advice we have received through many calls now with our 151 officer, what he is and the monitoring officer have enacted within Portsmouth, just over the water, and we do share that 151 officer between us and them, and what has been enacted by a very large number of local authorities up and down the country. So we will stand alone if we pursue this path this evening, and I think that will come back to haunt us. It is very clear where this is coming from, and I regret where we've reached. But I do need to make it clear that this is in direct contradiction to the advice of our 151 officer and the determination of monitoring officers in other jurisdictions.
Okay, are we ready to move for the vote on the motion? Councillor Jordan?
Yeah, as soon as I second it, could I have a few words?
Is there a second motion?
No,
there's
you
not.
weren't seconder of
the amendment.
Chairman, the amendment's been put forward, but it's been.
Well, speak anyway.
Can we speak on the item very quickly?
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. I am confused. It was interesting to hear the monitoring officer say, "Oh, is that clear?" Because no, to me, it isn't clear at all. In fact, I'm more confused after all of that. But here's my quick point. I can't see, someone's got to explain this to me. I can't see why we can't show the intent tonight. We're declaring an intent. If the legislation comes into place, to make a distinction between second homes, which we're prepared to concede that we will debate that at a future date when the legislation comes in, and we won't say tonight that's 100%. Why can't we say at the same time, but we do declare our intent to put 100% on empty properties? Why can't we do that?
Because I think it's been voted on that we can't. if I'm clear on that bit. Does anybody else have any comments on that? Councillor Spink?
Well, I don't know if it's technically a comment on that, but I am concerned. I am concerned by the comments of Councillor Jarman that this is an area of law upon which there is disagreement, and that, with no disrespect at all to our monitoring officer, if other monitoring officers have taken a different view, which is what Councillor Jarman is saying, then I find it difficult to know what I should do. And I wonder if, I can't see that we would be prejudiced if we adjourned this to the next meeting of full council for further legal investigation. I'm a little concerned, I have to say, and I don't mean to in any way undermine Mr. Potter's, I really don't, advice, but I think we're all getting a bit confused. I certainly am. I think it appears that different, not unreasonably, different monitoring officers are taking a different view. That happens. You go to one lawyer, they tell you one thing, you go to another, they tell you another. And it's because it's never black and white. It's invariably open to interpretation. I don't want to vote on something that I'll regret. And at the moment, I think the position is unclear. And I don't know if I'm allowed to do this technically, but I would suggest that we adjourn this decision to another date where we can look at what the monitoring officers elsewhere are recommending and take an across-the-board view.
Well, I think Mr. Potter, could you clarify that point, please?
Thank you, Chairman. As members have already expressed and understand, and I will repeat, the law is not in place for this local authority to set premiums at this present time. It is a bill. Local authorities are creatures of statute. What that means is that in contrast to central government, you can do absolutely nothing unless you actually have the statutory authority through legislation to do it. Now, this is a clear fundamental principle of local government. It's not a question of lawyers, having different views on. This is an absolute fundamental to how local government operates. And if, as has been urged upon councillors on occasions, that other people do it, well, Parliament is the supreme legislative authority in this country, parliamentary sovereignty. So unless Parliament has given you the powers, and given the fact that we know it's going through Parliament, that you do not have the powers, the idea that somehow one can seek statutory authority from other local authorities who have gone more than expressing a future intention, and some councils did go more than future intention. What is a common factor throughout this debate is that you are all entitled to express a future intention, a future disposition to use the legislation when it is in force in order to help the local authority deal with a number of urgent issues which the local authority faces and which many people out there face. But at the moment, you have absolutely no powers to make any decisions to implement. And in fairness to all members across the chamber, that is not the intention by Councillor Jarman's original motion. It is merely to express a future intention. And where there's been divergence, following the democratic vote, there was concern about the inclusion of 100% figures. The amendment was voted on, and those figures were taken out. So you have a substantive motion of expressing the intention to which all members want to express, except that the figures are not in the substantive motion. So a further amendment was suggested by Councillor Jarman about reinserting at least one of those figures, and that is a direct negative and therefore is not a valid amendment. So I would suggest, unless you wish other members to add to the debate, that members move to the vote unless they wish to do something else.
I'm going to go to Councillor Garrett because he hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to the monitoring officer, and I would concur with the words that he has said. What feels like is that various local councils have sought to set up a position which the House of Lords might have regard to, and so that at the third reading and at report stage, they might persuade government to bring forward further amendments. I know amendments were placed by peers for removing, for example, the 1 year period relating to the periodic occupancy clause, not strictly speaking a second homes clause. I feel though that there is a disquiet now amongst all members that we may have slightly shot ourselves in the foot and got ourselves into a pretty mess on this. So I do wonder if it might be constitutional just merely to move to next business, take a vote to move to next business, allow this substantive motion to drop without being decided, and therefore we will have not taken a position, but will clearly allow us to take a position without then bringing in the 6-month rule of have we taken the position and we're trying to unpick a decision we have taken before or whatever. It feels like that would suit Councillor Spink's kind of adjournment thing if we merely move to next business on this and then in the coming time find a way forward to reach unanimity. But otherwise, let us move to the vote on the substantive. But if there are feelings of that moving to next business might help us overcome that is a pretty mess, I think, then I will move that.
Councillor Lilley speaking next.
I was going to say let's move to the vote because I actually agree with what Councillor Garrett said. And I think we had a debate on it. We had a vote on Councillor amendment. That is now the substantive motive. Let's just go straight to the vote and move on. Because I think the key is to actually keep the spirit. I am very saddened that yet again, and this has happened to me on many occasions, which Councillor Brodie, that when I bring up child poverty into a motion, I get every time in history since I've been a councillor and I've raised this issue, we have something before it that actually brain deads us and gets away the things. I want to bring the debate of our children in. Can we move on?
I do have Councillor Luttiani and Councillor Brodie to speak, so first. Would you like to speak?
No, I
Councillor?
was just going to say, concur with that.
Okay.
Can we just go to the
Councillor-
vote? We've got substantive. Let's vote on it.
Councillor Brodie?
Chair, earlier on I suggested that maybe this should be because I just think this is the way that's been brought by the administration to full council has been an absolute disgrace leading to this appalling discussion. I agree with Councillor Garrett actually. If he wants to move next business, I would second that, and I think that would then have to be put to the vote first. Thank you.
I will do so that we move to next business.
Councillor Robertson?
Chair, you adjourned the meeting earlier on and we took advice about moving on from this agenda item during the adjournment. The clear advice is it would require agreement. And I sought Councillor Jarman's agreement as the bringer of the motion. He decided not to agree. That's absolutely fine. It's within his gift. This now sounds like an abusive process, a means of not deciding the final motion because it's been amended.
Was checking the process at this point. I think the advice is to move to the vote on the motion that is on the table now. So could we vote on that, please? All those in favour?
Chair, point of order. Can we have clarification from the monitoring officer? Motion was made by Councillor Garrett, which is a motion without notice for next to move to next business.
The
That has been
advice-
seconded. A motion without notice should always be dealt with first, according to the Constitution. Thank you.
Okay, the advice from the monitoring officer was that we should go to the vote, but I will get him to clarify that. Thank you.
through you, Chairman, just looking through the constitution in terms of closure motions, and I'll quote, "A member may move without comment the following motions at the end of a speech of another member. A, and the relevant one is to proceed to the next business. There are other ones, but this is one which has been tabled. It says, if a motion to proceed to next business is seconded, the chairman shall immediately put this to the vote, and if the majority of those voting in favour, the meeting will move immediately to the next item of business, and there'll be no further discussion or decision on the matter being considered." So that's what the constitution says. So yes, so effectively, we've got a motion. Appreciate we've got the substantive motion, but we've now had a matter put forward that proceed to next business, and therefore the closure motion would have to be dealt with first. So it needs to be seconded, voted on. Yep. So to clarify, members are voting on whether or not to move directly on to the next business without voting on the substantive motion. So you'd have to indicate for, against, or abstain on the closure motion, effectively to move immediately to the next business. That is the vote which is now on the floor.
Thank you for clarifying that, and thank you for bearing with us while we made sure we had the right details on that. It sounds like it is clear from that we should go to the motion to take it forward to, to the next item of business without discussing it further. So we are now voting on that to take it forward. That was proposed by Councillor Garrett and seconded by Councillor Brodie. So we move with that now, I believe. So those for going to the next item of business without discussing it. Those that are against going to the next item of business? So that is lost. So we now go back to the substantive motion that was amended, I believe. I hope I'm clear on that. Yes. So this is the substantive motion to, I think we probably ought to just read it out again so that we are clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the amendment which was carried, which was put forward by Councillor Robertson, which has now become the substantive motion, reads as follows: that full council declares its intention to implement and approve additional council tax premiums to be applied from the 1st of April 2024 or as soon as possible thereafter, subject to the legislation being in place, with a figure to be determined for such premiums and those premiums relating to second homes and empty properties.
Chair, I'd like a name vote, please.
4.
4 members to agree to a named vote. It is a named vote.
Thank you, Chairman. So
Potter will read the names out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's a named vote, and if you could please indicate for, against, or abstain when your name is read out. Councillor Andre.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Downer. Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jarman. Thank you. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan.
Against.
Councillor Lever.
Against.
Councillor Lucioni.
Against.
Councillor Medland. Against. Councillor Stevens. Against. Councillor Quigley. For. Councillor Garrett. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Brading. Councillor Churchman. Councillor Drew. Councillor Ellis. Councillor Hendry. Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Oliver. Or Councillor Outlaw. Councillor Peace. Councillor Price. Councillor Quirk. For. Councillor Redrup. For. Councillor Robertson. For. Councillor Spink. Councillor Ward. For. Councillor Brodie. Thank you. Councillor PC Wilcox. Against. Councillor Lilley. And Councillor Christensen.
I'm going to abstain. We've got 19 for that motion, 12 against and 1 abstention. So that motion is carried. Thank you. Just trying to figure out where I am now. I think I'm on to item 9, which is the motions submitted in advance, and it's Councillor Lilley's motion. Would you like to speak on that, please? Councillor Brodie, could you just turn your microphone off? Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Lilley.
What do I have? 5 minutes?
Yes, you have 5 minutes for as the mover of this motion. Thank you.
You've got the motion in front of you. In May 2020, we voted to have an extra full council meeting, to have time after the budget meeting to debate important issues. And I put forward to you that child poverty on the Isle of Wight is an issue that really needs debate and action. My last motion on the issue at the Isle of Wight full council meeting on the 16th of January 2019 highlighted the rise of child poverty and called for a 5-year commitment to reduce child poverty on the Isle of Wight over 5 years. And many of you that were there actually supported that. It is now 2023 and 4 years into this commitment, and in fact, child poverty has risen. COVID-19 and cost of living crisis has not helped, but this does not hide the fact that child poverty on the island was rising prior to these events. Nearly a third, 32% of children under the age of 18 on the Isle of Wight live in poverty, and there's been an increase of 10% from previous estimates. To me, this is totally unacceptable. It is not acceptable in 2023 for any child to go hungry at night, not have opportunities, and we need to put our children first and make this issue a priority. There are pockets of innovation and good practice, such as Ventnor with Baby Box, Newport with Pan Together, West Wight Community Centre, and in Ryde with Network Ride and Aspire Ride. And there are others. We just need to accelerate initiatives as these with clear targets and outcomes. The Joseph Rowntree and Bevins Foundation state that to tackle child poverty, you have to support people to increase household income, support parental relationships and parents, support parents to parent and nurture their children, develop preschool education, support schools to develop, have effective outside school activities and youth services, post-16 learning and opportunities, but most importantly, strong leadership, vision and commitment. This should be top down, but here, this should not be top down, but here in this room and across public, private and third sectors. There's some simple facts for you to consider. Nearly 1 out of 3 of us are aged, including myself, over 65. 28% of the population. 18% of our population are aged under 18. Our children and grandchildren. Does that not tell you something? Levels of child deprivation on the Isle of Wight have increased, not decreased in the past 5 years. The biggest indicator of child poverty is the eligibility of free school meals, which according to Isle of Wight has risen by 63% in the last 4 years. 22% of primary age school receive free school meals and 18% secondary age children. However, this is concentrated in urban areas and 12 areas wards on the Isle of Wight among the 20th most deprived in the country, and 3 of these are in the top 10%. The Isle of Wight was ranked 96 out of 317 local authority areas to average rank in 2019 on the indices of multiple deprivation. It is now ranked 80th in 2023. Isle of Wight is the 3rd most deprived area in the Solent region. It has to be noted the number of children living in care on the island is 109 per 10,000 compared to the national average of 10 per 10,000. We also have poor mental health and poverty. Mental health and poverty cannot be separated at all. Those working directly with people in poverty point out they are intimately linked, and spiraling relationships between mental health and poverty means that any support can struggle to meet people's needs, which simply means in these cases children and their families' mental health declines and they end up in acute service. This can be evidenced on the Isle of Wight. Mental health related hospital admissions on the Isle of Wight for those aged under 18 are 263.5 of 10%. This is the highest rate nationally. My last words is poverty from Nelson Mandela. Poverty is not an accident like slavery and apartheid. It is man-made and can be removed by the actions of human beings. I ask you to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Lilley, for those powerful words. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Brading did have his hand up earlier, and I think he wishes to speak first, so I will go to him. So, as a seconder, to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Lilley said a little bit earlier, actually, it's good to have airtime this topic, and I remember 2019 quite well because I was cabinet member at the time, and Mark and I worked very closely on the wording of the motion. We had engagement and wording of that motion at the time, and it was hard to get it on the agenda sometimes because of the other issues taken over. This is a very important issue that he is raising. Things are in place. We can do more. We need to do more. There are things in place already to help the child poverty issue, but it needs solving. I know Councillor Wanda will agree with that one. It's very hard to solve, but it's an issue that we have to recognise, and as an Isle Council, we have to solve. Goes with the housing part of it as well. So I fully support this motion. I'm grateful that he's brought it back to the table again. Ever since I became a councillor, it's something he's always spoke very passionately about. We had lots of conversations in the past around this, so I do fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members to speak. I've got Councillor Price next, and I think if others could put their hands back up so that I've got like a list. Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely support this. You know, to be here and even having to understand that there's widespread child poverty in our time on the council is just horrific. So I absolutely support Councillor Lilley's motion, and extending it is absolutely crucial because these last few years have prevented so many things going forward. And you know, let's not forget you've got almost a generation of children going through the education system that are affected by COVID, more than anything in their social development. And a huge thank you to teaching staff, LSAs, and the wider education staff for what they're doing to try and bring not just the education of those children on, but their social development. Where, you know, I've got a 10-year-old who's almost lost 2.5 years of her social development, and the teaching staff are doing everything they can to bring her and all her cohort up to the age that they should be operating at socially. I also want to just thank all the organisations you mentioned earlier, and particularly Pan Together, who also work in with residents from my ward and provide the service to some of the wider community in Newport. So 100% support this. Thank you.
Councillor Quigley. Councillor Brodie first then.
Thank you. I always say I'm very proud to represent Pan and Barton, but I'm less proud of the fact that I represent a ward that is in the 5% most private wards in terms of deprivation. In terms of child poverty, the figures are absolute. Just after the last time this motion, a similar motion was passed in 2019, stats showed that 35% of children within my ward are child poverty. That's increased by 2/3 over the last 4 years. That means we're talking about 56% of children. And I think, you know, as the local councillor, I've seen that happen over the last 10 years or so. My first few years, it was better. There was a lot of work being done with children to address poverty. And it seems to me that since round about 2010 and 11, things deteriorated. Councils can only do so much. Government needs to do more, in my view. But councils should need to put in place a strategy. In Pan and Barton, where I established Pan Together some years ago, and we've used a bottom-up approach in terms of trying to help people. And we get some help with our community larder is massively well used at the moment with some of the money from Connect for Communities. We raise a lot of the money ourselves through other financial sources. We're helping so many families with children on a weekly basis. We do what we can, but and I used to go to the health and wellbeing board. I don't bother now because it's the time, and plead for more support for wards like Pan and Barton, and probably parts of Warren Drew's ward, parts of Karen Lucione's ward, which have very high levels of deprivation. And I don't see that anything ever comes from the Health and Wellbeing Board, and I hope that one day they would actually start to do something meaningful. But this motion is something I will support. It's sad that we have to bring it back, that Miles having to bring it back 4 years later, you know, and some things have been done, but the bottom line is we need to make this one of our priorities, because there's nothing worse than me knowing, and everybody is sure, knowing that there are children who aren't being fed, on a regular basis, who are hungry at night, who go to school hungry, and whose only meal of the day quite often is a free school meal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Quigley.
I won't keep you all long because I think you're all going to support this, or we'll all support this, won't we? You'd have to have a particularly cold heart not to. Because the question is why has it not moved forward since it was last brought? And I know there's always a lot of excuses in between. But echoing what Councillor Brodie says, is there's some fantastic work done by charities, but relying on charity isn't a plan. Hoping that it'll get better due to the financial benevolence of other people isn't a plan. So once this goes through, we need to know what we're going to do. And any reorganisation in the council, one of its pillars needs to be solving poverty on the island, because without a concerted focus from all of us, nothing will change. And I agree with Councillor Brodie that a lot of it does need to come from government. We need to be ready.
Councillor Robertson.
I also support this motion, and I agree with everything that's been said so far. Councillor Lilley spoke eloquently in introducing it. And I'm sure he intends, and I'm sure we all intend, that this is more than just a motion and more than just words, and really picking up on what Councillor Quigley said, that it needs to result in a strategy with targets and outcomes, and not get forgotten about after tonight just because we all agree. And those need to be deliverable outcomes, and they need to be reviewed. And I know that's what Councillor Lilley will want. So after this vote happens tonight, let's make sure as councillors that it's actually delivered, and you're not having to bring another motion like this again, Councillor Lilley, because it went nowhere.
Councillor Stewart.
I would have supported this motion from the beginning, and I'm really pleased to see that there is cross chamber agreement on this. And I've listened to Councillor Quigley and Councillor Thompson agreeing that things need to be done. Can I just emphasise that one of those key things is housing. Without decent housing for families, child poverty will invariably continue.
Councillor Churchman.
Yes, how do many councillors realise there is a bill going up before Parliament to issue free school meals to all primary school children? I have circulated different emails that I have received from the sponsor of the bill. I can't remember her name. But are the council intending to really look hard at this to provide free school meals? Obviously, we're talking about money. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, Sadiq Khan in London has now blanketed the capital and said all primary school children will get free school meals. And if you think about it, these are our future. If you don't nourish your children's brains and body, you will not get good citizens, you won't get the intelligence. There's nothing worse for small children than to be cold and not fed properly. So really, folks, what we should be doing is investing in our children to produce the next generation and hopefully some councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Would it be appropriate if I suggested that it goes onto the children's scrutiny agendas to discuss it in length further and to put some of those targets that many of you wanted to see on it? Could that be noted that I would like that to happen? And Councillor Andre, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. As Cabinet Member for Children's Services and Education, it does indeed fall to me and my Cabinet. I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's really good after some of the discourse that we've had in this chamber tonight to actually have something that I'm sure we do all support and agree on. I can assure members that myself and the Cabinet, we do indeed prioritise our children and their future, but I do agree we can do more. But just to highlight some things, of course, we are using the Department of Work and Pensions Connect for Communities Fund to its absolute fullest. And it has to be distributed in very tight timescales, but we are ensuring that I can assure every single penny of that money is used to support families to pay for fuel bills, warm bedding, clothing. Councillor Quigley mentioned about reliance on charities. We are actually funding some of that distribution, but I agree there needs to be more. But I think one thing for me that is very clear that comes out of this is we all have to take ownership of this and responsibility of this. I can lead it, but it's something that we all need to work with. For example, things, housing, all areas of the council need to focus. I think it's an excellent idea to take it to policy and scrutiny, and I look forward to developing a strong strategy to move forward with this and to do everything to be assured that we are doing everything that we can to eradicate child poverty. Thank you.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. To live in child poverty is a grinding and miserable experience. Acutely aware of that myself. Councillor Quigley nailed it. Is how, in a sense, is how do we not repeat what happened 4 years ago? That we resolved with great and good heart to do something and then did not do something. So, absolutely, I believe there's the place for the Policy and Scrutiny Committee to take this forward. But what I would most welcome is at the earliest opportunity, that Cabinet places on its forward plan the date at which it will receive this strategy, so that it can be placed into the workings of this council. It can inform the review of the corporate plan. It can inform the housing acquisition strategy, as Councillor Stewart was alluding to, which I understand is due to get to us by July at the latest this year. And it can inform our corporate restructure, because we just do not want to make the same mistake that somehow we have, unintentionally, I'm sure, of not taking forward Councillor Lilley's motion of 2019. We can put that right by ensuring that by, I don't want to name a month, but I know strategies do take a little while to write, but there are plenty of good examples out there to do that I would sincerely hope that we would see by May at the latest, something come before Cabinet. And for that to be certainly the case, it needs to be on the forward plan pretty much from tomorrow.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chair. All of course 100% support Councillor Lilley's motion. Thank you for bringing it forward, and thank you for your speech where you outlined the situation we're in. Do reflect though, as I'm sat here this evening, we didn't just suddenly arrive in this space, did we? We didn't suddenly arrive in a place where we've got food banks on every corner. We've got community pantries now that we're all very pleased about, Councillor, don't get me wrong. But how have we suddenly landed in this space? It's absolutely insane. And it makes me feel sick that our country is going down a path that is limiting people's lives in the future. And I feel absolutely sick to the stomach that we're in this situation. Councillor Brodie mentioned in the last 10 years. What's happened in the last 10 years, Councillor Brodie? Thank you.
If there's no one else to speak, I will come back to Councillor Lilley as the mover of that motion. Would you like to reply to that? Or do you want...
Firstly, I'd like to thank councillors that actually contributed to this, and I think there's some very important facts. I think the particular issue on housing, as a psychologist that worked with poverty for nearly 5, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if someone's got a roof over their head within that, and that it's when people are living in poor housing. There's actually people in my ward, will go to school, go in fact from Councillor Drew's ward to a school in my area, where they've actually gone to school with mould on their clothes because there is mould in the housing that they're actually in, and they haven't afford a washing machine, so the school has to supply a washing machine to do that. That is totally unacceptable. And I think that what I thank you for all tonight is recognise that we collectively make sure this gets onto the agenda. I welcome that it will go to scrutiny, children's scrutiny. I do think every department needs to contribute, and I also think we can go out into our community. I really compliment the work that Councillor Brodie has done with PAN, looking at doing similar things in Ryde, but he has been a pioneer on this, and we need to get in all our communities those kinds of models of projects which actually get the town councils and the voluntary sectors and the private sectors all working together with us to actually get that forward. I take the point about the forward plan. Yes, can we actually get it onto the forward plan, that a report and strategy will come via the children's scrutiny, and that actually gets to the cabinet of that. And I get all of you at the future full councils to be raising and saying, where is it within that? I do not want to come back. I probably won't be here to come back actually, but I don't want to come back in the future to actually see that we actually have to go from 2028 to a further thing, because we can actually do something. So I welcome your support for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are voting to take this forward, this motion forward, and I would think in the sort of strongest way we possibly can to have an effective strategy. So vote, would you like to vote on that now? So those that are for taking that motion forward, please. Thank you. Is there anyone against? And anyone abstain? Any abstentions? No, I don't think there is. So I think we've carried that forward. Thank you. On to item 10. We've still got time to do question time, member questions. So we have a written question from Councillor Stewart that has been submitted. Would you like to, should we read that question out? Is that the way we'd like to take this? So if Councillor Stewart reads his question out, please. Thank you.
Was quite happy to allow for the fact that most of you can probably read it. Therefore, we will leave the question as sits. I welcome an answer.
Okay, thank you. So who's answering? Julie, Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Stewart, for the answer. Sorry, the question. Sorry, here's your answer. So it's going to be brief. Which you'll be pleased about, I'm sure. The report informing the Cabinet decision in November 2022 to dispose of the Kingston Marine Park site, subject to the result of negotiations and with the proposed purchaser, addresses most of the points raised in the question. In addition, I will provide a full written response addressing the key points.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Sorry about that. I didn't have the question in front of me, but it was on the floor. So that's why I was slightly confused, because I hadn't seen it, but thank you. Is there any other member questions? Are you happy with that written response coming through to you? Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Any Councillor Quirk?
So just can the response to that question be circulated to all members?
Yes, I believe that can be. If it'll be published online. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Spink, you look keen. Thank you.
Only this, I had understood that if a written question was submitted within the time limit, then a full written reply should be given at the meeting. And I wonder why that isn't being applied, if I'm right on that.
Councillor Jones-Evans?
So I have answered the majority of the question. The actual question, what the start of it says, will the council provide the estimated monetary figures? We're not in a position to do that right now, and as Councillor Spink's aware, and people that sat on the scrutiny committee, that I promised I would bring forth those details when we're able to, when as soon as everything is confirmed. I'm not today. I'm not in that position, but we'll be very soon. So as promised, the information will be forthcoming. So I have this. So the written aspect of the response I've given to Councillor Stewart today won't be coming straight away, but be coming as soon as practically possible, and that is my promise.
Okay, is that sufficient that we'll have the information when they have it?
There's nothing more I can say, really. Yes.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, or can we close the meeting at 8:35 p.m? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Good night.